And the World Bank's group Econothon continues, and as I hand over the next hour and a half to our colleagues in the Middle East region. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to the World Bank Group's Econothon. It's our first day-long live stream around the globe discussing important topics on economics and development. During the next 24 hours, we are coming to you live from the World Bank headquarters in Washington, D.C., and from the regions where we work. We are discussing how strong economics, finance, statistics, and data support our mission to alleviate extreme poverty and build shared prosperity. Since the World Bank was founded 75 years ago, it has become a leader in development finance with deep analytical expertise that supports our lending and advisory work in developing countries. During the Econothon, you'll hear from World Bank Group economists and experts who are working on country programs and projects to highlight the value of data and research, such as the Women, Business, and Law analysis and the Doing Business indicators that help catalyze reforms in country. You will also hear from our clients, the people we work to help. We want to stimulate new thinking and share knowledge about the solutions to the world's toughest challenges and how we can come closer to prosperity for all. I hope you will join us as we look at the challenges, progress, and potential for reducing poverty and improving lives everywhere in the world. I hope you will join our Middle East, North Africa region over the next 2 hours to see the challenges, progress, and potential for meeting the aspirations of the people in the region.
Thank you very much, David. This is important for us. The people of MENA, young people in MENA, men, women in MENA, those with tremendous energies. We've been talking about trying to tap into that energy, try to make sure that, that drive coming from young people, men, women in MENA, really takes us into the right direction, takes us where we should be going, takes the whole region of MENA to new heights in terms of performance, in terms of growth, in terms of jobs, and in terms of promise and trust in the future. What are we going to be looking at? We've been talking about human capital, education, health. We've been talking about engaging in the private sector, absolutely fundamental. We've been talking about the digitalization of the economy in MENA, bringing new technology into the conversation, taking startups to scale-ups, taking this whole industry to a totally different level. This is where we want to go. So over the coming an hour and a half, you will be listening to some of our colleagues, to some of our friends, to some of our partners talk about this new way for MENA to really reach to the moon and make sure that we get to where we should be getting.
The number of college graduates in the Middle East and North Africa is expected to reach 30 million by 2020. But the region's economies are not generating enough high-skilled jobs for this increasingly well-educated population. This leads to frustration and a waste of valuable human potential. More than 140 million quality jobs need to be created by 2022 for youth entering the MENA labor market. How can this be done? Like reaching the moon, it will take a huge effort to create a new economy that delivers more and better opportunities for the region's youth. The most promising approach for the Arab world is to embrace the digital economy and create a culture of creativity, innovation, and risk-taking. To get there, countries need to set ambitious goals. By 2022, everyone should have access to broadband internet and have systems in place to make digital payments the norm. with new rules designed to encourage innovation, as well as guarantee the security of transactions. Young people in the Middle East and North Africa are well educated and tech savvy. They're already online. By embracing the digital economy, let's give them a chance to work online.
The government of Jordan has hosted the first Digital Mashreq Forum in Amman earlier this month. And basically that forum is very much aligned with what the World Bank is doing across the region in terms of supporting digital economy. And in this forum, we wanted to show that there are key pillars in digital economy that we need to support, including areas relevant to infrastructure, to platforms, to entrepreneurship, to digital payments, as well as areas relevant to e-payments. So these together form the digital economy structure that the World Bank is putting now for the Mashreq area as well as the wider region. In the Mashreq area, we focused very much on the three countries of Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon. And in this forum, we had more than 600 people participating from more than 24 countries. The type of participants included private sector, public sector, civil society, and investors. What's unique about this forum is that it brought a lot of international experiences as well as nice success stories coming from the region to show that we have the passion, we have the inertia, we have the power to do a lot more in this region, but all these capabilities are still untapped, and therefore we need to work together to make them happen. I would say the biggest two outcomes of the forum, on the policy side, there was the so-called Amman communique, which basically has announced the commitments of the three governments on supporting digital economy. So there you can see some commitments relevant to cashless payments, something relevant to the national broadband, as well as digital skills and entrepreneurship. And from the other side, the biggest outcome was having the connections with more than 20 international investors coming from the Silicon Valley and the region, having more than 145 business-to-business meetings. This is just the start of a process that will continue over the next years to make sure that we can leverage the digital economy potential in the region and make sure that we can all alleviate poverty and support employment.
Hello, my name is Zaina Saab. I'm the co-founder of SE Factory, which is a coding bootcamp based in Lebanon. I've been really happy to be here at the conference. What really stood out in my mind was first being able to see the status of Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan in terms of where we stand in the digital economy and digital skills, and then what the commitments are for each country within the next year or two. So it's a very exciting thing for us to be able to come back in a year and to see the progress that was made. On a personal level, I learned a lot. I made really important connections, got a lot of new ideas for our coding bootcamp, made potentially new partnerships, and let's see where we go a year from now.
أنا ديما بيبي الرئيس التنفيذي لمؤسسة إنجاز. أكثر شيء أسعدني بالمؤتمر اليوم بالمخرجات تحديداً هو التزام الحكومة بالاستثمار في الموارد البشرية، الاستثمار في طلاب المدارس تحديداً فيما يتعلق ببناء المهارات الرقمية اللي هي بتساعد هالشباب والصبايا لما يتخرجوا، بتساعدهم كثير بسوق العمل. فالتزمت الحكومة بإدماج المهارات الرقمية في النظام التعليمي، والتزمت إنه
in the education sector, and that from now until 2020, at least 300,000 students will have access to these programs and skills that will prepare them for the job market.
Here at the first edition of the Digital Mashreq Forum. And what I loved so much about this event is really bringing the region's government to the table with the investors and the entrepreneurial community at the highest level, prime ministers and deputy prime ministers committing to improving the entrepreneurial ecosystems in their countries. And we tremendously need this right now as startups need to be able to rapidly expand across the region and grow to meet the needs of growing and developing the economies in our region. Of course, they've committed now to those changes. The devil is in the detail, and we look forward to seeing the implementation rapidly in the coming period.
Good morning. So I'm here to talk to you about entrepreneurship. Why do we care about entrepreneurship? Because we need to create jobs. And we need to create jobs for young people, we need to create jobs for women, and we need to create jobs in the Maghreb countries. So we have launched many initiatives and elements of support to entrepreneurship in Maghreb, part of it through support to the ecosystem that is done jointly by the World Bank and the AFC, but also through financing, in particular equity financing, and now to help startups and small firms to begin and to grow and to create jobs. And in that context, we have intervention at the country level, but we are also trying to bring together entrepreneurs and startups and innovators from the whole Maghreb region so that they can learn from each other, share their experience, share their ideas, but also begin to reach out to equity financiers, venture capital, and mobilize the diaspora of their countries. So in that end, we have organized an event recently in Casablanca to bring together all these practitioners and entrepreneurs and to create the Maghreb Startup Network, which is a way to convene together all these people who have tons of ideas and trying to share their ideas and be able to mobilize the know-how, the knowledge on how to push forward their ideas and to get the financing and to connect to the rest of the world, because this is not just about each Maghreb country or the Maghreb region, but connecting to the world. So this is the background. This is really related to our focus on job creation, broadening market, but also bring the best opportunities to the young and women in Maghreb.
So I'm very happy to be here with my friends from Morocco, Tunisia and Libya to launch officially the network, because it's very important to us to meet each other, to see that we're facing the same issues, the same problem, but also the same challenges, because the Maghreb is a big market finally, and for these tech companies, working together can help us to do great things, and we will see how we can together work on better give access to our startup to the market, how to include the diaspora of our country into this growth, and also how to help our institution to improve our infrastructure in each of our countries, and at least but not least to create a financing system that will enable startups to grow as they can, because today we have real opportunities in Maghreb. So the financing will be one of the main subjects we work on.
The objective of this network is to accelerate the integration of the startup networks, ecosystems between the four countries, from Libya, Tunisia, Algeria and Morocco. We have seen a lot of work happening. What we want to do is to connect the ecosystem and accelerate the outputs. Therefore, for example, when a company startup works well in Algeria, it's easy to replicate it in Libya, Tunisia and Morocco. When a startup in Tunisia, you can bring it to Morocco, and etc. And why not create more GVs and funds to make sure that the single market, the single Maghreb market for startups became an interesting market for everybody.
I'm a real believer of the Maghreb region. I think that we have so much potential, and that we can, the Maghreb youth can do so much together. It's about time that we connect, start to talk to each other and to do business with each other, and also to help each other enhancing the environment. environment of business and also opening a new market. So I think this is overdue, and I'm happy that finally we managed to launch the network today.
The Middle East and North Africa region needs to find a new momentum. It needs to deploy new reforms that are going to go much deeper into opening up these economies, these markets, and offer opportunities for women and for the youth. It needs to also adopt technology and use technology to its advantage, including by providing a better internet, an affordable internet, including in lagging region. It needs to also allow for more financial inclusion by providing mobile payment solution, internet payment solution, again, including to lagging region, so as to create the markets and the opportunities that our youth are dreaming of. In the next hour, you'll hear my colleagues talk a lot more about these challenges and the opportunities that technology provides. And over to you, Federica. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabat, and hello, everyone. Today, I'll talk about the future work in the Middle East and North Africa region. It is undeniable that the world of work is going through very important and fast changes today. We see technology changing all aspects of the economy, including labor markets. The way people work is shifting. The skill demand is changing, and new job opportunities are coming up. We see that for the first time, technology is spreading beyond high-income countries. Emerging markets are leaders in technology like digital payment or e-commerce. Digital platforms are making a fundamental change in the traditional business models. The region is going through a massive demographic transition. We expect in the next 20 years, 300 million youth entering the labor market, looking for great job opportunities, income opportunities, and the fact that private sector jobs are not available and the public sector job it can no longer sustain, that just reinforces the urge to think how we can create a better equilibrium in the region. And we see that MENA is the most underserved region when it comes to digital infrastructure. Per 100 inhabitants, less than 10 have broadband subscription. And if you compare that to instead 120 mobile subscription for 100 inhabitants, that means that the region uses social media, but digital payments that are very important for digital platforms to run their business in a country are not existent. So this lack of change, this lack of transformation, the low adoption of technology has pushed the region into a very low equilibrium. When we look at labor market, we see low performance across the board. You see that youth unemployment for the past 25 years has been the highest in the world, and 1/3 of these young people unemployment are tertiary educated, and many of them are women. We see that the women participation in the labor force is about 22%. If you compare that to 54 around the globe, that is very low. And unfortunately, for those who can't afford to be without a job, the informal sector waits for them. So the share of youth employed in the informal sector in countries like Egypt, Lebanon, Tunisia, West Bank and Gaza, or Jordan, it goes between 70 to 80%. So the question is how the region can move from such low equilibrium into a high equilibrium scenario in which the markets are dynamic. The labor markets are inclusive. Youth, women, and the less fortunate have the same opportunity of others. And technology and innovation are widespread. That would require implementing a new social contract that is based on 3 pillars, which is simultaneous interventions on structural transformation, job creation, and social inclusion. That means that to enhance job creation and to enhance such structural transformation, we'll have to remove the obstacles to doing business, to the entry of firms, to the growth of firms. And in the 21st century, we can do that without widespread adoption of technology. It also means enhancing the private sector jobs that are so much needed in the region. Most important things, one of the most important aspects is to make sure there is equality of opportunity. Investing in human capital, investing in people mobility, investing in social protection can have huge payoffs in the region, because that would allow a better match between the supply and the demand, would allow people and firms to work through a transition, adjust to the changes that technology is bringing.
8 years ago, thousands of Tunisians descended on the streets, and they were asking for a radical change in the country's political, social, and economic system. And it was in a context of high unemployment and lack of economic opportunities. Since then, Tunisia has embarked on this transition, and there's been a lot of focus on improving the business environment, which in the past was providing privileged access to land, credit, energy to a handful of firms, while the overwhelming majority of entrepreneurs and firms were facing a difficult business environment with cumbersome administrative procedures and just difficulty to enter in different markets. When you look at the past 8 years and all the efforts that has been put on reforming the economy, are you satisfied, and where do you think things should go further?
There are things that have been done, but there was a major focus on political and social reforms. And I think now it's big time to focus on the economy and on implementation of reforms. So many reforms are underway. But one has to say that Tunisia has some sound foundations in terms of legal framework, investment framework, but there is still that it needs to be done. And the real life, the numbers show that the unemployment is still a heavy issue, the challenge to deal with, especially when it comes to women and youth, and when it comes to graduates, who are those who suffer most from the scarcity of jobs. Even though, so the more you are educated, the less the lower your opportunity to get a job actually. So and this is absurd and leading to a high level of brain drain. So the question is, we'll have to create an engine, a machine, turn the country into an engine of creating new jobs, and this can only happen by creating new ventures that will be creating the jobs through blood, sweat, and tears, actually. So real work that is going to be supported by investment, which is today a real hurdle for new ventures, knowing that the banks are sitting in a real comfort zone right now, and that the credit lines are distributed to a kind of VIP customers. The PE and the venture capital ecosystem are still embryonic, so like in the early stages.
Historically, trade, especially export and investment, have been key drivers of growth and job creation in Tunisia. But really, the key is moving forward entrepreneurship, and this resonates a lot with research we've done at the bank, at the World Bank, in Tunisia, and in other countries in the region. And what we actually found was two main things. First, that most of the jobs were created by new firms and young firms, but the problem was that there was just not enough creation, as you mentioned. And the second thing we found was that it was the most innovative, the most productive firm that actually created most jobs, while the rest of the older firms was actually destroying jobs. But when we looked at Tunisia, we compare it to emerging economies, we found that firms did not improve their innovation and their productivity much as they grew older, while in emerging economies, productivity growth was just very, 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 very high. You are at the intersection of these young firms, new firms that are quite innovative, the startups, and there's been progress recently in advancing reforms to unleash that potential. How do you see what has been done?
So actually fully agree with you. This is particularly relevant for Tunisia and accurate for Tunisia, since Tunisian industry is based on, so if you look at the automotive or textile or agriculture, it's all repetitive, rule-based and predictable jobs who are going to disappear with digitalization. So what we need is actually build a strong pipeline of new productive, innovative and scalable businesses who will create new net jobs. And what happened lately in Tunisia, mainly with the Startup Act, is a very positive momentum and a very positive signal to the Tunisian youth, but also to the world, with the Startup Act as a law giving a set of advantages for entrepreneurs, allowing them to have fiscal advantages, access to foreign currency accounts, etc. But more important than the law itself is actually the process that has led to this law, that has been groundbreaking through its participatory approach, where the civil society, entrepreneurs, the government, but also the international corporation players like the World Bank, for instance, have been working hand in hand to push this project to happen. We have also seen the creation of new advocacy structures like Tunisian Startups Association that has been advocating for this, comparing to the classical structures for advocacy like UTICA and UGTT for typically. So a lot of usage of the media and the social media to advocate for this topic. And the bank has been supporting with the whole process with funding the fund of funds, who is going to be investing in this pipeline of startups that will be created in an appropriate way so it's like adequate financing depending on the life stage of the startup, plus investing in the innovation ecosystem as a whole in the tech SMEs. So yes, there is a lot of stuff that has been done, but there is still a lot that has to be done. If we look at the startup as one of the pillars but just the beginning of transformation of Tunisia as a digital economy. And for that, we'll have to maybe develop a proper vision for Tunisia. Where do we see Tunisia? What kind of image and association do we want to have with Tunisia in the next 10 years? But also support with a proper governance and implementation capacity for the digital agenda for Tunisia.
Oh, yeah, I mean, if you agree, let's drill down on this issue that you raised on the transformation, economic transformation of Tunisia and the startups, and discuss, this issue of the potential impact of startups. There are skeptics, but we at the World Bank, when we look at it, we definitely see areas of comparative advantage. Tunisia has a young population, tech savvy, quite well trained in science, technology, and engineering. That's one. Two, there's geography and culture and language. Tunisia is between Europe and sub-Saharan Africa. People practice 2 to 3 languages: Arabic, French, English. So first, can Tunisian startups be competitive and export their services? Two, can they contribute to lifting the overall productivity of the economy? And to me, that will need to come through greater partnership between startups and large older firms in agribusiness, in other areas of manufacturing, in services. Do you see potential in that happening, and do you see it from the ground?
Brilliant. This is a very good question, because it's at the core of having Tunisia climb the value ladder in terms of value creation. But what we'd like to see is actually have the startups create the value in Tunisia. So what's happening today is that we're having a large number of Tunisian startups that are creating B2B solutions in deep tech and in high tech. So I don't know, like Datavora, like Barak, like the cybersecurity solutions with AI, Innova Robotics building robots. And all
those are Tunisian startups.
These are Tunisian startups, and they are offering solutions, global solutions for enterprise in the world. And typically, they are having harder time selling in Tunisia than abroad. So the question is, how can we unlock this connection to the Tunisian enterprise and to the Tunisian government? And this can only go through enabling the transformation of the digital transformation of the enterprise, enterprise, but also creating some connection mechanisms like open innovation, like hackathons, like also unlocking the capacity of the government as a buyer. We're having a discussion to build with the UTICA to build a joint task force to collaborate on unlocking and enabling these mechanisms.
Yeah, maybe you can tell us a little bit more on that issue, which is so important. What needs to happen for the startups to stay in Tunisia and as I said, improve the overall economy? What do you want to see more of?
Okay, for that to happen, we'll have, so why are they leaving actually? They're leaving because they are looking for funding and they're not able to find the adequate financing in Tunisia, and they're looking for new markets. So if we enable the funding through accelerating the projects that have been started in terms of fund of funds, but also we can even do more because we need more of these to create a mature ecosystem, but also enable the connection with the enterprise so that the enterprise can see the Tunisian solutions as a way to solve their own problems. So this is actually a matter of connecting the dots in Tunisia and connecting the players of the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, those are very important points, and I think there are steps towards that. The bank has recently approved a project that will provide seed equity financing to startups, will support the startup ecosystem and this overall transformation. I wanted to touch again in that economic impact of startups, how they can contribute to the modernization of the state, which is, basically the startup to business, to state collaboration. The bank has recently used a lot of hackathons, for example, with the Court of Accounts to find development solution. The questions were, how can the administration improve efficiently, auditing of public accounts? How do you analyze this huge amount of data? What needs to happen for this greater collaboration between startups and the state to modernize the public administration?
So if you look at the startup as problem solvers, it's just about giving access to the startups to the government in order to solve these problems. And it's also about unlocking the capacity of the government to buy from these startups. So public procurement is a topic. Open innovation is a topic. Hackathons are good as an education, as a way to educate the government in terms of this new mindset and with this new way of doing, but we need to close the loop in terms of with the open innovation scheme, where the government commits to implement the solution of these innovators within the government, tested by it and implemented.
And just to finish on that argument, which is key, which is around market access for startups, do you think this new way of interaction between the state and startup can change the way the state procures goods and services, especially towards startups and SMEs, and what do you think needs to change for that to happen?
So enabling, unlocking the capacity of the state to buy from the SMEs and startups. The laws are there. It's about implementing them. The PPP have public-private partnerships as a mechanism and framework has been there, been out there, but not implemented. These methodologies like open innovation and incubation, etc., are a part of the mechanisms that have been tested worldwide in order to be able to connect the dots actually and create this connection between those who provide the solutions and those who are in need for solutions.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, as you said, there's a lot of initiatives happening. The bank is contributing and linking a lot with the private sector. But where do you think the bank could do more to accelerate this transformation?
Great. So what's happening is already fantastic. We need to build on what's happening, maybe through connecting the dots, because for a properly working ecosystem and a mature ecosystem, we'll have to have all the components of the ecosystem working together. So having the university, R&D work together with the startup ecosystem, financing, government, enterprise, so enable all these connections. Maybe connecting the dots towards the region for stronger regional integration, on a layer, on a level where the startups could collaborate, create solutions for the regions and for the continents, for instance. Have Tunisia play a key role, maybe as part of the moonshot and Smart Africa, reinforce the positioning of Tunisia in Smart Africa. But also for the bank as a knowledge bank, we need we might need support with facts, with the data, to support the whole business case for the whole thing. So imagine that, for instance, like for VC funding in the US or in Europe, only 2% goes to startups founded by women. So it's just 2%. So if we have the data for the country and for the region, we might be able to support this discussion with facts. And maybe one more thing about the methodology. If we are talking startups, we will have to iterate and test more, adjust more, and this so we will the time is going to be critical in the startup discussion. So we will not have the luxury to test something and then come back in 3 years and see what's happening. It's going to be more iterative, more agile, and it's like just do it like a startup. Jump from the cliff and build your airplane before landing.
Yeah. So fast implementation, lean, adaptive implementation. Thank you so much, Amel. It was a great discussion. Tunisia can be proud of you and all the startups that are trying to advance the country's economy.
Thank you so much.
Reforms are key for reducing poverty and boosting shared prosperity, as they do support economic growth and job creation. For this, the government of Egypt has implemented a first wave of far-reaching economic reforms with World Bank Group support, which have stabilized the economy, improved the business environment, and provided the underpinnings for a second generation of reforms. The main elements of the second wave of reforms include further strengthening of human capital, advancing the digital economy, and promoting private sector-led growth and job creation. The World Bank Group, as trusted advisor to the government of Egypt, is supporting Egypt on promoting private sector-led growth, focusing on entrepreneurs and women inclusion through several lending and advisory operations, some of which includes advising the government of Egypt on business and entrepreneurship enabling legal and regulatory frameworks such as the investment law, the industrial licensing law, the competition law, and the company law. Also, the World Bank Group is supporting the Ministry of Investment and International Cooperation in expanding, decentralizing, and modernizing its investors and entrepreneur service centers through the EASE project. In addition, providing access to finance to the entrepreneurship ecosystem, as well as advancing financial inclusion.
In the past 5 years, Egypt embarked on a bold reform program to improve the investment climate in Egypt and to prepare Egypt to welcome private sector investments. One of these bold reforms were the new investment law, number 72, which was passed in the year 2017. And the new investment law defined many guarantees and incentives for the investors, as well as defined how we should support entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Egypt. There are four main pillars that we are working on. The first pillar is the regulatory framework. So what we did is we have introduced a new legal shape, which is the single-person company, which could be very suitable for young entrepreneurs. And we have also reformed other related laws like the capital market law and the minority shareholder law. The second pillar is the access to finance pillar, where we are trying to provide an alternative access to finance to young entrepreneurs, besides the debt financing, which is the equity financing. So we have started the initiative Fikretak Shirketak, which finances young entrepreneurs with an equity share of up to 1 million Egyptian pounds or up to 10%. The third pillar, which the initiative is building on, is to provide free of charge consultancy services to entrepreneurs, such as technical consultancy, legal consultancy, business consultancy, but also government support. Actually, we are standing here now in the ESC, the Entrepreneur Service Center, one of these centers that provide these services free of charge. The government support and legal consultancy, they connect to our other services that are provided to investors overall, so young entrepreneurs can go establish their company in one day using the digital signature in the ISC to start formally their business. The fourth pillar is based on providing facilities, accelerators, incubators to entrepreneurs where they can kickstart their project, their idea, and support them also with mentorship and further consultancy. Such accelerators, we have currently in this initiative 3 main accelerators. We have Falak, which is generally supporting entrepreneurs, but we have also 2 other specific accelerators, one focusing on fintech technology, EFG, EV, and we have Inara, which focuses on clean tech and renewable energy. These 4 pillars go hand in hand with all the other services that we provide for entrepreneurs. Currently, we have around 40% women entrepreneurs, which is a high participation rate, which also includes the partners, the women partners in entrepreneurs. Finally, I would like to highlight that we do 2 cycles per year. We have a web application where entrepreneurs can submit their ideas and projects. The first phase of going through the filtration is to go through the applications. Then we have introduced a bus that tours around the 27 governorates in Egypt to increase the reachability to the entrepreneurs. We go to them, we meet with them, and we go through a second phase of selection. And finally, through a boot camp, we choose for each cycle around 30 entrepreneurs to start supporting them in our accelerators and incubators. All in all, Egypt has done a lot in the past years to boost the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Egypt, and I think that we have really shaken the entire ecosystem, and we receive thousands of applications and thousands of ideas, and this reachability has helped a lot young people to submit their ideas and projects.
We are BNAS, we are a cloud HR platform, empowering SMEs and MSMEs to gain more and more power in the digital ground here. So our cloud HR platform, giving and availing payroll tools, HR tools, and medical insurance to MSMEs, as they are the growth engine of all economies, and they actually need more and more support to be able to unlock more resources. So transforming Egypt here and other economies in our region from the cash-based payroll to more on the financial inclusion and fintech, using fintech to give them more financial inclusion, more financing options to the employees and the companies itself, as well as medical insurance to have the workforce working with peace of mind and covered by a special policy covering more and more of their pain areas on that ground. Actually, currently our team is 17. We have more plans by the end of this year to have more than 140 team members, covering several aspects from tech to sales to commercial from different backgrounds.
There are a myriad of players and factors that together form what we call the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Currently in Egypt, these players have a heavy vested interest in pushing and propelling this ecosystem forward, and this is creating the favorable conditions that we're now experiencing. When I say players, I mean regulators and policymakers in terms of creating an adequate regulatory framework, a conducive business environment, with the heavy policy focus on entrepreneurship and innovation, because they see the significant development impact that this has, whether in terms of GDP growth, job creation, or in the case of fintech, on expanding financial inclusion. There are also new financing mechanisms such as VCs that have their eye on the financial gains that the sector has to offer, and so they're working on expanding the financial tools that they're offering and also empowering more entrepreneurs to participate with them. We have a large and growing youth population that is very dynamic and very innovative, and that is increasingly viewing entrepreneurship and starting their own business as an attractive career choice. We also have a very large market with changing consumer behavioral patterns. They have with more demand for innovative and new products and services, and this is creating more demand for entrepreneurs to enter the market and fulfill these demands. So together, all these players come together and they form the vibrant ecosystem and enabling factors that Egypt is currently enjoying.
Actually, there's been great momentum in the past couple of years in regards to regulations and administrative areas. However, I believe to encourage more startup and SMEs ecosystem, we need to work on several aspects. One of them is R&D, creating more and more R&D and scientific research centers, especially in universities. So when it comes to more developed economies and technologies, it was all coming out from universities, R&D, whereby big corporates and even international organizations invest effort and money to have more resources, to have more technologies, to have more great minds working in the ecosystem itself. And also we need to have more agility when it comes to understanding what's happening on the international grounds. So maybe the ecosystems, the laws, the regulations should be moving as in fast pace as it's going to understand more and more about the marketplaces, fintech, and all the new terminology. On another aspect, the ecosystem itself, from coming from SME and startups, need more and more support on their, maybe we said the financing option, we said the different options, but again, it needs different support from all the society itself. From our side, we're trying to give more support on the organization and payroll level. However, it needs more collaborative support, as we said, on the financial level, financing, and on the administrative area as well, to be more and more agile, understanding the needs of the ecosystem itself.
I am Noor and I work as an economist in the West Bank and Gaza office. The World Bank works in fragile environments in the MENA region where we face a very specific set of development challenges. The West Bank and Gaza is an example of such fragile environments where the challenges are so unique and cannot be found anywhere else in the region, in my opinion. For starters, when we talk about the West Bank and Gaza, we are talking about two separate economies, one in the West Bank and another one in Gaza. These two economies do not have any geographical connection, and even economic flows between both economies are extremely limited. Gaza has been under a blockade for more than 10 years now, which has isolated its economy from the rest of the world. It has also been through a number of wars and episodes of conflict over the last 10 years. These two factors have almost paralyzed its economy and have left it with severe economic and social conditions. In the West Bank, the challenges are a bit different. For example, Palestinian businesses cannot access 60% of the West Bank because it is still under Israeli control. This is what we call Area C. What makes this more challenging is that Area C is the only contiguous land in the West Bank, and it houses the majority of the natural resources, including agricultural lands and water resources. Administrative, security, and logistical measures imposed by the government of Israel in the West Bank significantly increased trade costs for Palestinian firms. According to the Doing Business data, I'm actually quoting one of our reports here, average trade costs per transaction for a Palestinian firm are nearly 3 times as high as for an Israeli firm, while the average duration of the import process for a Palestinian firm is nearly 4 times as long as for an Israeli firm. So you can only imagine what this does to the competitiveness of Palestinian firms. In addition to the external restrictions that I just described, the Palestinian economy also suffers from a number of internal constraints. For example, business regulation is in an urgent need of update. Laws and regulations governing business in the West Bank and Gaza date back to different historical periods in Palestinian history. Some of them date back to Ottoman times, others to British times. Others are still based on Jordanian laws that in Jordan have actually been updated. There are also legal differences between the West Bank and Gaza. The Palestinian Authority has been conducting efforts to try and deal with these issues. So it's been working on passing a new companies law that, according to our experts, when adopted, will be the best in the region. Lack of land registration, particularly in the West Bank, where only 30% of land is officially registered, is also a very big challenge, as this limits the release of this very important asset into the economic space. The Palestinian education system is also failing to match skills to the labor market needs. Most Palestinian graduates are lacking skills needed by the private sector, particularly when it comes to social skills. More efforts are also needed to focus on vocational training to attract younger people to this stream. As a result of the external restrictions and the internal constraints that I just described, the Palestinian economy has become stuck in a low-income, low-growth trap that is not creating jobs fast enough to keep up with the rapidly growing labor force. If we look at the most recent data, 1 in every 3 Palestinians in the labor force is actually unemployed. The numbers become more striking if we look at Gaza separately, where youth unemployment reached more than 70% in 2018. If we want to look at poverty numbers, almost a quarter of the Palestinian population lives below the $5.50 per day poverty line. Now, in addition to the brief description of the challenges that I just gave you, we thought that it would be interesting for you to hear firsthand from Palestinians from different walks of life talking about their challenges. So we went out, we took a couple of videos that we hope you find informative and useful.
An exchange business is affected by many factors: the economic situation of the country, the geopolitical situation of the country, issues relating to investor confidence, governance, quality of financial disclosure and access to information. So our challenge, I would say, is multifaceted. There are many factors that come into play. Do I believe that we are able to do this in spite of the difficulties? Yes, I believe that we are. We do benchmark what we do here in Palestine with our peers in the region. Definitely, we deploy best-of-breed technology. We have very open and progressive capital market legislation in Palestine. Our banking system is, I say, well regulated and governed, and Palestinian banks tend to be fairly liquid and quite profitable. So that augurs well for the ecosystem of a capital market. Of course, another particular challenge, and that basically has probably not specific to Palestine, but it would be a more general trait of any frontier market, is the unequal distribution of income and the high levels of poverty. Obviously, you cannot expect for there to be a large pool of potential investors when you have a significant portion of the population that is barely able to make ends meet.
So the challenges that Palestinian startups face in Palestine go hand in hand with their development throughout the years. The first challenge that we faced was registering our company. There is no one-stop shop in Palestine where you go either online or otherwise to register your company. So you have to go through multiple ministries and you have to have the presence of a lawyer with you. The second part is the capital required to register your company is pretty high in Palestine. And the third point is that there are no laws and regulations in Palestine to accommodate this type of company. So most investors do not have the rights that they want in Palestine, so they require the startups to register in another country that accommodate their rules. The second part regarding the investors is that regional and international investors find it extremely difficult and high risk to invest in companies and startups in Palestine, given the economic and political instability. Now, that being said, even our local VCs and investors, they don't have the capital or the pool of money high enough to accommodate the startups when you're comparing them with regional and international investors.
So we started Amoro as the first Palestinian mushroom production farm in 2013. We faced a lot of challenges. One of them can be the access to the inputs of our production cycle. Having the borders controlled by the Israelis limited our access to our inputs and our exports. But mainly our inputs is what affected us the most, because one of the cases, a container got delayed for about 92 days, and that created a huge problem for us that ended up with us having to shut down our operations for a year and a half.
أنا إلي بشتغل 10 سنين بالهيئة العامة للإذاعة والتلفزيون.
I've been working for the Palestine Broadcasting Corporation for the last 10 years. We are facing financial crisis as because of Israel cut off the payments paid to the Palestinians, and that meant that we would receive 50 to 60% of our salaries. This created major challenges, and we now started rationing our spending. We are unable to pay some payments, such as the tuition of our children. All these financial burdens grew when you are when your income depends on one income, and when this income is reduced or cut off, you face a problem. Of course, this affected not just me, but many people. There are more than 130,000 employees in the West Bank and Gaza, and they were largely affected, and they could not make payments. We have car payments, mortgage payments, and the banks are making these deductions for that. So whatever remains is not sufficient for us to live. This is a major challenge, but at the same time, we cannot perform our mission in life. We continue in this regard, and we hope that the situation would be resolved soon.
I graduated 9 years ago. Unfortunately, I worked only within the sector of journalism 3 weeks, and unfortunately also that I created only the 3 weeks, otherwise I wouldn't work within. This is the problem that we face as a youth and a new generations in Palestine right now. I mean, we are honest about that, and we're facing this problem while we know that there's no other choice. So either you have to be in the box or you have to think out of the box. And the moment of truth for me was like, I don't want to be a burden for the society. I want to be creative. I want to find my path in a different way, either with journalism or with art, but I have to find myself because I need to survive. So I start to think, at the moment that I'm doing this t-shirt brands, I feel like it's doing well with me, so I left the sector of journalism and political science and start to find myself in a different way that I'm producing, but this is not really what I wanted to do, and I feel myself that I have to do that because I'm pushed to do that.
I am Mark, and I'm a program leader in the West Bank and Gaza office. You've heard already about some of the challenges facing the Palestinian people and Palestinian businesses. And to close, I want to talk directly about the World Bank's program and engagement. In line with some of the earlier comments, job creation is a key element of our assistance strategy. We want to create economic opportunities that lead to jobs. At the same time, we're also focused on sustainable service delivery. Recognizing that the only way for secure and sustainable jobs to be created is through the private sector, we're very much focused on a private sector driven strategy. In our engagement, one of the key elements is our analytical work. Earlier when describing some of the challenges facing the economy, we were drawing very much on some of the analytical work that we've conducted over recent years. We see this work as important because it can really set the scene and inform the actions of all other actors trying to make a difference to the performance of the economy and to the lives of Palestinian people. Beyond the analytical work, we have an active project-level engagement. Again, drawing on some of the comments earlier about the challenges of the business environment, we are doing active work on both the regulatory and legislative situation for facing Palestinian businesses. The companies law is a significant reform, but in addition to that, we've recently had a new secure transactions law and work on land registration, which have both contributed to access to finance for businesses. We hope that through these engagements we can make a difference to the ability of businesses to operate, especially for startups. In the education sphere, we recognise the challenges of better aligning training institutions with the needs of the economy. We have a number of projects in this sphere, but one of the most innovative ones relates to development impact bonds. This is the first time such an instrument has been used by the bank, and it involves engaging investors that delivers job outcomes. In other sectors, we also are engaged both in energy, water, municipal, etc., where the focus is very much on trying to work with the Palestinian institutions to ensure financial sustainability of what are costly infrastructure services. In these areas, we work very much on improving operations and maintenance capacity and also revenue protection programs. In addition, in terms of service delivery, we are focused on improving the networks and distribution systems to improve the quality and efficiency of services that are provided. This is particularly the case in Gaza, where there's been major challenges in service delivery. To sum up, we have got it's a small program, but it's a very exciting program, which we believe can make a difference to the lives of the Palestinian people.
Hello everyone, and thank you for connecting to the live stream on Yemen. My name is Nabil Shayban. I'm the Senior Operations Officer from the Yemen Country Management Unit in the World Bank Middle East and North Africa region. I'm happy to facilitate a live panel discussion on Yemen under the title Sharing the World Bank Experience of Working Together with the United Nations across the humanitarian development peace nexus in Yemen's ongoing conflict. But before introducing our distinguished panelists here with me on the studio and open it up for discussion, allow me to give you a quick snapshot of the World Bank engagement in the current conflict context of Yemen and the value the World Bank adds to the humanitarian development nexus in the country. As you all know, Yemen has been mired with an active conflict that is now in its 5th year. The conflict has drastically impacted the whole country in terms of thousands of lost lives, worsening humanitarian and development conditions. The UN describes Yemen as the worst humanitarian disaster in modern day. And the impact of the conflict on the people of Yemen has been appalling, and numbers talk for themselves. More than 22 million of Yemen's 29 million population are in need of humanitarian assistance. Close to 10 million are on the verge of famine. 2 million kids are out of school, and 2.2 million Yemenis have been displaced from their homes because of the ongoing armed conflict, and the numbers horrific numbers, go on and on. But equally important, the country's infrastructure, economic livelihood, and the cohesiveness of society have all but drastically impacted and deteriorated. In July 2015, the UN declared Yemen a level 3 humanitarian crisis. This is a classification that describes the most severe of humanitarian conditions around the world. And it has increasingly become very much clear that humanitarian assistance alone was not going to do the job and was not adequate to meet and respond to the growing needs of the people of Yemen. Since then, the UN and INGOs, with funding from the international community, stepped in to support Yemen and to respond to the humanitarian crisis. We at the World Bank also stepped up to the plate on the development front, steadily increasing our development funding for the Yemeni people to $1.76 billion. This is unprecedented in terms of bank engagement in a country in active conflict around the world. The bank assistance has been focusing on restoring economic livelihood by providing income support and cash assistance. We've also been providing support to the restoration of health and nutrition services and health systems. And we've been able to help respond to the country's cholera epidemic outbreak. We have implemented integrated urban services in the country and restored agricultural production, as well as also provided access to electricity. Our impact in terms of numbers have been remarkable. 15 million people, just to name a few, 15 million Yemenis have received essential health and nutrition services. 1.4 million Yemeni poor households have received cash assistance. More than 8 million workdays have been created. It is important to note here that the underlying principle that has guided our World Bank engagement in Yemen in the current conflict context has been to sustain basic service delivery in the country to the most vulnerable population, and most importantly, to strengthen society's resilience as well as the resilience of national institutions. So let me address two sets of questions as background to our panelists as we discuss the linkages and collaboration across the human development peace nexus. First question is about how did the World Bank deliver its services and its assistance to the Yemeni people in the current conflict context. Despite the political uncertainty and the high security risk, the bank was able to forge an extraordinary partnership, operational partnership with United Nations agencies on the ground. And in turn, we have been able to deliver a lifeline of funding to critical national service delivery institutions through the United Nations. And such institutions include the Pro-Poor Social Fund for Development and the Labor Intensive Works Program. Both play a pivotal role in the country's delivery of critical services in the current conflict context and also in post-peace Yemen, the time where Yemenis will also need such institutions. Second question is about how do we add value as World Bank and complement the engagement of humanitarian agencies on the ground. Well, the World Bank UN implementation model that we have in Yemen, adopted in the protracted conflict of Yemen, is considered one of the most successful models that actually deserves attention and visibility. It is an effective way of really collaborating across the humanitarian development peace nexus. Our complementarity as World Bank to this nexus comes basically from bringing a system-oriented crisis response, and I can cite many examples. Let me just cite a couple of examples. Unlike humanitarian assistance, which provides immediate life-saving relief and is of a short time horizon and is based on annual funding cycle, in contrast, our World Bank assistance is of a medium to long-term horizon and is also multi-annual financing cycle. But most importantly, it supports a system approach, which may take time to bear fruit, but eventually will provide sustainability and really sustainability in the country going forward. So our operations in Yemen demonstrate that it is possible to combine both short and medium-term objectives, i.e. provide life-saving assistance with our cash transfers and nutrition and health services, but do so while maintaining the critical health service delivery and system continuity. For example, when the cholera epidemic in Yemen broke out, so the hygiene, the sanitation and hygiene and water response by humanitarians focus on the immediate supply of hygiene kits, chlorination, and also the delivery of water, immediately water supply. But our intervention in this case moved towards addressing the underlying cause for the outbreak of the cholera epidemic. And we did that through water quality monitoring, we did that through sanitation improvement, and we did that through establishing more of a system to address these causes. Yes, and there are many examples which I will actually move towards our panelists who have also first-hand experience on this. We have with me 3 distinguished panelists from the World Bank and from UN agencies, from UNDP and UNICEF, that have helped us really implement World Bank operations on the ground in Yemen. They're here with us to share their experience and their thoughts on how we can best really cooperate further to implement the HDP nexus in the Yemen coast. We have Jihan Abdel Ghaffar, who is the senior advisor to the Yemen executive director in the World Bank board. She's a first-hand knowledge on Yemen. She's been working on Yemen for over a decade now, and she's has been very supportive in the board in the Yemen program. We have Sarah Yanti from UNICEF. She's been very instrumental. She's one of the lead that have helped us implement a large-scale operation in Yemen through UNICEF. She's currently the resident representative of UNICEF in Yemen. Congratulations. It's an excellent promotion, well-deserved. And we have also connecting with us from Amman, Asma Shalabi from UNDP Yemen. Asma oversees strategy and coordination on behalf of UNDP Yemen. She's also been very instrumental in advancing our collaboration with UNDP. Let me start really by coming back to this issue of preserving national capacity and the delivery of critical services in the Yemen context. This is where we add value to this nexus. I would like to ask each and every one of you one question, and that is, it's about our collaboration. How can we really further embody and facilitate the response across the HDP nexus in the Yemen ongoing conflict, as well as the worsening humanitarian and development conditions? Let me start by addressing the question to Jihan. Thank you, Jihan, for joining us. Please.
First, thank you for having me here, and greetings to all of those who are joining our conversation today. I think it's very important to first recognize that this is the first time in the history of the World Bank group that the bank decided to engage or re-engage in a country in conflict using the actual allocation of the IDA, the International Development Associates allocation for the country. And that's by itself is considered a paradigm shift in how the World Bank is understanding the importance of continuing to engage in countries in conflict. And I think it's also useful within this to also reflect on the context of making such a decision. So there are two things after the suspension of the operation of the World Bank in Yemen in 2015 due to the conflict, two things that frame the conversation around re-engagement. And they were around the why and how. So on the why, it was the question of the bank being a trusted development partner for Yemen for decades. And if we just use an example of the Social Fund for Development, for example, or the Public Work Project, the bank invested in those projects. They helped the establishment, in fact, of those institutions in Yemen. And if we learned one lesson, I think it will be the importance of building institutions, and that they actually pay off when a crisis happen, because these institutions were able to continue delivering during the conflict. And the question was, how can we support the resilience of those institutions? Because they're the ones who were able to deliver services to the people during the time of crisis. And those are institutions that were well known internationally as well as locally, that they are inclusive in nature. And so how can we support all of Yemen as much as we could? So the support of the institution was very centric to the conversation, in addition, of course, to helping the Yemeni people to weather the impact of the crisis and the conflict. And so then the question became of how to do that. The bank is under suspension, suspended its operation in Yemen, so how to do it? And that's when the question came to who are our partners on the ground. The bank does not have presence anymore in Yemen at that point, and so it was the UN agencies that they have the comparative advantage on the ground, being present. They have the experience and the skills. And so how can we partner with the UN to deliver on the bank mission in Yemen? And so that's how the idea of, or how the whole re-engagement in Yemen started is through our partners on the ground.
Yeah, let me move to Sarah in Amman. I think UNDP is also one of the lead UN agencies on the ground through which we actually, piloted our re-engagement in Yemen's active conflict. Over to you, Sarah, if you can give us really quick highlight of really how the bank has been able to complement the work that UN humanitarian agencies are doing on the ground in Yemen. That would be great.
Hi Nabil, it's Asma from Amman. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. I think the World Bank was able to very strategically read the context in Yemen, and this is when the IDA funding was triggered. Being the worst humanitarian crisis, as you mentioned, most of the attention and most of the funding was going to life-saving activities. And so this has dropped a whole part of work in development that was not given any attention to. And thankfully, you've made the strategic investment to, first of all, look at that and then support us and support the local partners in Yemen to do that. In UNDP, we are working with you on the Emergency Crisis Response Project, and its value started with a $250 million package, and then it increased and is now, I understand, about $400 million. Through your support, we're able to reach about 500,000 persons through wage employment and to provide 4 million people with access to services. More than 16,000 SMEs are supported and generating an additional 75,000 jobs. So obviously, in a context where it's pre-famine or famine-like, we're able to give the Yemenis the purchasing power to put food on the table and have some sort of resilience and independency out of humanitarian relief. And this falls exactly at the same time or the same year that the World Humanitarian Summit was enacted in Istanbul in May 2016, where it was clearly stated that we do not work, in a continuum, that development work and humanitarian work have to go hand in hand at the same time.
No, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And I'm just with UNICEF. I think you've been very critical in delivering IDA's cash assistance program to, almost 1.5 million poor Yemeni households. I mean, maybe you can share that perspective from UNICEF, delivery of this program, how that really complements the life-saving program with also the cash assistance and creating that sense of livelihood in the country.
Well, firstly, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and also I joined the other speakers who've talked about the partnership with the World Bank and the UN and talked about how unique that partnership is. It's groundbreaking. It's a paradigm shift, but it's really made impact in the lives of people. You mentioned 1.5 million households, but that actually translates into almost 9 million individuals benefiting from that emergency cash transfer. And with the empirical evidence that we have, we find that over 90% consistently, with us just ending the 5th payment cycle, over 90% have been using this cash assistance for food and for medical services. And I think if you look at the situation in Yemen as you described, this is really life-saving within itself. At the same time, it is also preserving the system, the government's own, or the country's own pre-conflict social safety net, which was the social welfare fund, which was a system with the country's own allocations, the country's own resources that reached these families every single month prior to the conflict. And when we talk about the humanitarian development nexus and system strengthening and system preservation, we should also realize that it's not only support to an institution, because a system goes beyond just an entity. But you look at legislation, you look at policies, you look at targeting when it comes to cash assistance, you look at the benefit amount, and the entire system, including the human resources, is being preserved, not through the institution, but by keeping all of the parameters of the pre-existing social safety net with the World Bank funding These families that used to receive this funding prior to the conflict are still receiving. And these families, the most vulnerable, the most marginalized in Yemen, are receiving this cash assistance, receiving this support. So I think we should look at this not necessarily only from institutional strengthening, but strengthening of systems around all of the parameters included in a system, which go beyond just the human resources.
And also on the development front, we're also engaging with the UNOPS, the United Agency, the UN Operations and Project Services. And through that, we've put $200 million into UNOPS to actually deliver more of a development-oriented, intervention. If you look at the Integrated Urban Services Project and the Emergency Electricity Access Project, these two projects are not humanitarian in nature, but they do provide the necessary services that are needed for humanitarians to be able to work. And for example, they provide water and electricity to hospitals, and they construct roads to facilitate access to health and imports, and also access to markets. Where do you see additional examples that actually define this delineation between humanitarian and development? Because this is important to define.
Well, let me just start by saying that I had the pleasure of visiting the UNOPS project in my first visit to Yemen, beginning of this month. It was a high-level delegation from the bank. It was the dean of the board and the VP, MENA VP, were a member of these delegations, and it was to send a very strong commitment to the support of the Yemeni people. And we visited this project, and something that we also need to keep in mind when we look at this project, they actually touch the lives of people directly. But there are also other aspects to it. It also provides resilience to the private sector, because at the end of the day, the contractors are local private sector in Yemen. And so there is indirect benefit that not necessarily we see it, but it's there. It's the resilience of the systems, it's the resilience of the institutions, it's the resilience of the private sector, of the communities, because at the end of the day, it's the communities in other projects like the social fund and PW, they are the ones who are empowered to select those projects that's important for them. And so at this time and age, it's very difficult to draw the line between really the development and humanitarian support that countries need. They all merge at certain points in which you need to see it as a holistic approach and how to help the people and the country, and to put the seeds of peace in these countries. There is a peace dividends out of this that we need to recognize. It's about the hope that you're giving the people for the future, that there is partners that are committed to support Yemen and the Yemeni people, and that's gonna go. It's about also investing in the future of the Yemeni people. When you invest in human capital, you are investing in the future of the country.
Yeah. Let me go to Sarah in Amman. Are you still there, Sarah? I'm here. Yes, you've been very much, implementing our large-scale intervention through SFD in the economic livelihood component and income generation component. Can you just tell us exactly what are you trying to achieve by really keeping the SFD going, and tell us how this relationship is materializing and really sustaining a sense of livelihood and a sense of hope for a better future for the country.
I think we're trying to be relevant in a predominantly humanitarian context where civil servants haven't been paid salaries. Now partially, but since 2016, and so we're trying to support national institutions. We've released a study recently in UNDP that shows that in only 4 years, hard-won development gains have been reversed, and basically development has been reversed by 21 years in Yemen. So it's critical for us to support these institutions. Most of the deaths right now, the study says, in Yemen are actually caused indirectly, and these deaths are caused due to lack of access of food, water, and healthcare. So basically basic services. And so this means that national institutions have been the hardest hit and are no longer able to resume their roles. Now, more specifically, since the context is so complex, the normal enablers of partnership and of delivery are not there. So we jointly with the World Bank, but also our national partners, the Social Fund for Development and the Public Works Program, have had to be very creative and work together in a creative way to be able to deliver on the ground. And this has been done through a number of areas. So we've been working together to strengthen those institutions and make them deliver on a scalable, rapid, and cost-effective delivery. We've also relied on their institutional political autonomy and neutrality, which has been key to deliver across the front lines and has allowed us to reach most districts and Yemen in a deep way. They've been working on neutral targeting and prioritizing the most affected populations. So we do coordinate with the humanitarian country team and in our planning. They've used participatory community-based approaches. They've been very responsive and flexible, and they've been adjusting their targeting, their implementation approach to all the emerging needs. For example, cholera response, or even contingencies like security incidents. They've been very good at risk management, which was not an area they were, endeavoring in before the conflict. They've had a dynamic mechanism allowing the prevention and mitigation. And they've been using also increasingly conflict-sensitive approach to mitigate, issues on the ground using sub-project selection on the implementation. So all this to say that we cannot do this without close and tight cooperation. And I have to say the partnership between the four institutions has been exemplary in that way, because we work together, we learn by working, and we readapted chronically. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Let me come back to a very critical sector, and I think that we have pretty much overlooked over the last 5 years of Yemen's active conflict. That is education. The education system in Yemen is in shambles because of the conflict, and the bank is currently really considering support and re-engagement in the education sector in the country. And when we see UNICEF as a potential partner, and I would like to hear from you, how do you see the education sector and the support that we envisage to have being really designed going forward?
Well, most definitely, the education sector is a sector of need. When we look at our own, being the lead for education in the UN partners in Yemen, when we look at our own funding situation for education, just that alone as an indicator, it's the least funded sector. When we look at the needs in that sector, they're so diverse across the country, different needs, and really it's one of the sectors where we don't have sufficient interventions. We have recently, using and building on what you mentioned earlier, the system that we've put in place for the emergency cash transfer, we've been able to address one of the issues that Asma in Amman raised, which is the issue of lack of salary to civil servants. Because of that lack of salary to civil servants, teachers' incentives have been given to provide teachers with some transportation costs and basic provisions to enable them go to school and teach. And we're using the platform established by the World Bank support for the cash transfers to pay the teachers' incentives with the same risk mitigation systems. So when you talk about the issue of system strengthening, all of these coming together into one piece, looking at how we leverage the investments already made through the partnership to ensure that we actually use that to propel towards intervening in sectors that have the least attention right now.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Let me just really summarize what I've gotten from this conversation. I think it is very critical for us as World Bank and United Nations to continue to co-leverage our capacities and our added value in supporting of the humanitarian development peace nexus. And one important critical point here is really we need to see how our collaboration in the human development nexus contribute also to the peace element, to really pushing for peace and peace prospects in the country. This is something that we need to really to work together on how we really activate that missing element. And therefore, I think we some sort of a consistent and structured dialogue and coordination platform needs to be put in place that can actually bring us together with those who are working on politics and security. I think that's very critical element that is missing. One last thing is about a subject that is dear to my heart. It is about citizen engagement. And I think it is very crucial that we work together as UN and World Bank under this partnership to actually develop a citizen information and communication strategy in which we are able to establish some sort of transparency on humanitarian and development financing for the country and also for disseminating the impact. I'd like to thank you all for connecting to this live stream on Yemen. I think you have a last point before we are cut off.
I think it's very important for all of the listeners to be aware that just most recently the Humanitarian Country Team, under the leadership of the Humanitarian Coordinator for Yemen, Lise Grande, we've now engaged with a consultant to look at how we develop an infrastructure and a system for humanitarian development peace nexus, and we already have decided on the structure that will be used for that to be rolled out. So that's already happening, and I think it's something we need to continue engaging on with the World Bank.
That's excellent. We're fully on board, and I think this is has been an extraordinary partnership that has proven to deliver in the Yemen active conflicts. I'd like to thank you all. Thank you, Sarah from Amman. Thank you to Jihan.
Sarah here.
Sarah's
Asma
here.
in Amman.
Asma is in Amman. Thank you all for joining us. And we actually will continue the conversation on Yemen, how we also further collaborate with our UN partners on the development, humanitarian and peace nexus. Thank you all, and goodbye from here.